Nathan stood in the kitchen, his fingers wrapped around his coffee mug as though it were a lifeline holding him steady against the quiet, oppressive tension that had settled in the house over the past few months. The morning drizzle outside did little to soothe the storm brewing inside him. His eyes wandered over the dark liquid in the mug, but his thoughts were far away, consumed by the unease that had slowly started to seep into every aspect of his life. The silence in the house was louder than the rain. He could feel it gnawing at him. Something wasn't right. Courtney had been different lately. Distant, distracted, as if she were living in some parallel universe, while Nathan remained stuck in the one they had once built together. He couldn't quite pinpoint when things had begun to shift, but the change was undeniable. The woman who once made him laugh, who was his partner through thick and thin, had slowly turned into a stranger. But tonight, Nathan would learn the truth of it all in a way he never could have imagined. A sharp click of heels on the hardwood floor shattered the quiet, drawing his attention to the doorframe. Courtney stood there, her back slightly arched as she scrolled through her phone, her lips pulling into an unreadable expression. She hadn't even noticed him standing there at first, too absorbed in whatever was happening on the screen. The casualness of it all hit Nathan in the gut, as if she couldn't even be bothered to pretend like she cared about him anymore. "I'm going out tonight," she said, her voice so nonchalant it made his stomach churn. She didn't even look up at him when she spoke, absorbed in whatever was on her phone. The words hung in the air like a challenge, the implication of her statement hitting him squarely in the chest. Nathan blinked, momentarily thrown off balance by the bluntness of it all. "Where to?" he asked, his voice lower than usual, tinged with the kind of uncertainty that had slowly taken root in his heart. Courtney finally lifted her gaze from the phone, her eyes locking with his for the first time since she entered the kitchen. The smile on her face was cold, calculated, something that didn't reach her eyes. Nathan felt the familiar unease in his stomach turn to something far darker. "I'm going to spend a wild night with David," she said, each word slow and deliberate, like a knife carving its way into his chest. Her tone was indifferent, as if she were announcing plans to buy groceries, something completely trivial and mundane. Nathan's heart skipped a beat at the mention of David's name. He knew who David was. He had seen him once or twice at the club, heard Courtney talk about him in passing. The occasional mention of David had always seemed harmless enough, something about work or a friend. But hearing her say his name now, the way she said it, made Nathan's pulse quicken. David, the man who was somehow now tied to his wife in ways Nathan didn't understand. Nathan stood frozen for a moment, processing her words, trying to get a grip on the confusion spiraling inside him. He had no idea where to begin, but he needed answers. He wasn't ready for this. "What do you mean, spending a wild night with him?" Nathan's voice rose, the disbelief in it palpable, though he tried to keep himself steady. Courtney looked at him, a dull sort of amusement in her gaze. She didn't seem concerned by his reaction. In fact, she seemed almost bored, like she was telling him about her day at the office, nothing more. "David makes me feel alive, Nathan," she said, as though explaining something basic, like the weather or what she had for lunch. Her words felt like poison. "He makes me feel something real, something different, something you can't give me anymore." Nathan's mind whirled as he struggled to digest what she had just said. Alive? Alive? Courtney, his wife of 5 years, was telling him that she didn't feel alive with him anymore. The woman he had loved, the woman he had once thought of as his partner, had checked out. Emotionally, physically, mentally. And now she was openly admitting it to his face. His heart slammed in his chest as he tried to steady his breath. "You're a married woman," Nathan said, the words coming out in a harsh whisper. "Does that mean nothing to you?" Courtney didn't even flinch at his words. She stood there, arms crossed, looking at him with an emotionless expression that cut deeper than any argument could. "I don't care anymore, Nathan," she replied, her voice growing sharper with every word. "I've been married to a ghost for too long. I want something different, something real. And David gives that to me." Nathan could feel the blood rushing to his face, the heat rising from his neck to his cheeks as rage began to bubble up inside him, making his hands shake. "This is insane," he muttered, almost as if trying to convince himself. You're just going to walk out after everything we've been through? You're just going to leave me for a fling with some guy from the club? Courtney's lips curled into a mocking smile, one that made his stomach churn. You think it's just a fling? She asked, stepping closer to him, her voice low and venomous. I don't need you anymore. I don't need this life. I want to feel something exciting, something that doesn't revolve around your predictable, boring existence. Her words hit him like a slap to the face, a reality that had been brewing for months now finally crashing down on him. Nathan's whole world, the life they had built, the promises they had made, felt like it was being ripped apart in front of him. And yet Courtney stood there, completely indifferent to the pain she was causing. Nathan swallowed hard, his throat tight. He wanted to scream, to lash out, to demand an explanation. But his mind was too clouded with anger and disbelief to form the words. All he could do was stand there, feeling the weight of her betrayal pressed down on him with every passing second. This marriage has been dead for a long time, Courtney continued, her voice colder now, final. You're just too pathetic to admit it. Nathan's heart constricted at her words. It was like a dagger to the chest. She was right. He had seen the signs, the growing distance, the late nights at work, the lack of intimacy, but he had refused to acknowledge it. And now here she was, declaring the death of their marriage as though it were nothing more than a minor inconvenience. Pathetic? Nathan said, his voice shaking with a mix of rage and despair. We built this life together, Courtney, and you're just going to throw it all away for some random guy? Courtney took a step forward, closing the distance between them. Her gaze was cold, her eyes hard and unfeeling. I don't care about any of that anymore, she said, her voice a cruel whisper. I don't need you. I don't need this life. I want excitement. I want to feel alive again, and you'll never understand that. Nathan's chest tightened, the words cutting deeper than anything he had ever felt. He had always been there for her, always the steady one, the one who kept things together, the one who made sure they had everything they needed. But now, none of it mattered. He was nothing more than a comfort, a predictable accessory in her life. Fine, Nathan said, his voice barely above a whisper. His anger now felt distant, muted. If you walk out that door tonight, don't come back. Courtney paused for a moment, as if weighing her options. For a brief second, Nathan thought he saw a flicker of something in her eyes. Regret, maybe, or hesitation. But then it was gone. She smirked, her eyes gleaming with a sense of finality. You really think I care? She asked, shaking her head. I'll do whatever I want, and I won't look back. With that, she turned on her heel and walked down the hall, her footsteps echoing in the silence that had settled over the house. Nathan stood in the kitchen, his hands gripping the counter as if holding on for dear life. He could hear her packing upstairs, zippers being pulled, drawers being opened and closed. She was really leaving. This wasn't a fight. This wasn't a temporary blow-up. She was walking out, and Nathan knew in that moment that everything had changed. Minutes later, the front door slammed shut, and Courtney was gone. The house was quiet. Far too quiet. Nathan stood there for a long time, staring at the empty space she had left behind. He felt something inside him snap, but it wasn't sadness or despair. It was rage. Pure, unadulterated rage. For the first time in his life, Nathan felt like he was capable of anything. The silence in Nathan's house after Courtney left was suffocating. For a moment, he simply stood there, frozen in the kitchen, staring at the empty space where she had stood just minutes before. The woman he had loved, the one who had been his partner in everything for so many years, was gone. But what stung even more than her departure was the way she had left without a second glance, without remorse, as if their life together had never mattered. And now the rage inside him began to stir, cold and deliberate. This wasn't just betrayal. This was war. Nathan had never been a man given to explosive emotions, preferring to solve problems with logic, with reason. But this was different. She had crossed a line, and there would be consequences. It wasn't enough to be hurt or angry. He needed to dismantle everything she had built, piece by piece. She had made her choice, and now it was his turn. But this wouldn't be a rash decision, a momentary outburst. No, this would be calculated, methodical. His revenge would be something she would feel in every fiber of her being. A slow burn that would eat away at everything she held dear. Nathan knew he had to start with David, the man who had wormed his way into their life, the one Courtney had turned to when she wanted something new, something alive. David had taken something irreplaceable from him, and Nathan wouldn't let that go unpunished. But Nathan wasn't just going to get angry and confront David. No, he was too smart for that. He would break David down from the inside out, slowly, carefully. The cracks would form in David's perfect life, and no one would know where the damage had come from. The first step was simple: research. Nathan had always been good at tracking down information, piecing together the smallest details until they became something larger, something much more dangerous. The world David had built was a house of cards, and Nathan was going to knock it down, one piece at a time. Hours later, Nathan sat at his desk in the dim light, his fingers dancing across the keyboard as he searched for everything he could find about David. Social media profiles, LinkedIn connections, financial records, business dealings. Nothing was off limits. It didn't take long for him to find the first clue. David had a small but lucrative real estate portfolio. Nathan noted the details, filed them away for later. He had learned enough from years of working in software development to know that even the most secure systems had weaknesses, and David's life was no different. David had always been the confident, carefree guy. Tall, athletic, the type who enjoyed his nights out on the town surrounded by friends and alcohol. Always the life of the party. He wasn't the kind of man to think twice about the consequences of his actions. But now Nathan was going to give him a reason to think about nothing else. He scrolled through photos of David, seeing a man who was always smiling, always in control, always surrounded by the right people. There, in the middle of the page, was a picture that made Nathan's stomach twist. It was a photo of David and Courtney together at some rooftop bar. Their faces were too close, their hands touching in a way that was too intimate for a simple friendship. The anger flared up again, but Nathan quelled it quickly. This wasn't about raw emotion. This was about dismantling everything, piece by piece. Next, Nathan moved on to the financials. David had a solid reputation in real estate, but Nathan had already found a few small discrepancies, transactions that didn't quite add up. Nothing major, at least not yet. But with the right push, those small discrepancies would become something much larger. Nathan began making anonymous calls to David's clients, tipping them off about possible financial irregularities in his dealings. He made sure that the word would spread, but not too fast. Subtlety was key. If David's world began to fall apart too quickly, he would catch on. So Nathan took his time, letting the rumors grow quietly, like a disease spreading slowly through the body. As for Courtney, Nathan had already started setting his trap. He transferred every penny from their joint account into a private account, making sure she had no access to the money she had so freely spent for years. The house was still in both of their names, but Nathan had already spoken to a lawyer, starting the process of severing her from any financial claims on the property. As he logged into the bank account, he smiled coldly. This was just the beginning. Courtney had always cared about appearances, about what people thought of her. She prided herself on being the perfect wife, the one who had it all. So Nathan decided to take that from her too. He began to draft anonymous emails and messages that would start to erode her reputation. A few harmless rumors here, a little gossip there. His goal wasn't to destroy her overnight. No. He would let these whispers grow, spread like wildfire until her once perfect life was reduced to ashes. Weeks passed, and Nathan continued his work behind the scenes. The cracks started to show in David's life. Business deals fell through, clients pulled out, and whispers began to surface about his financial dealings. Meanwhile, Courtney was left to grapple with the emptiness of her decisions. She called Nathan, frantic, demanding answers, but he was cold. He had no interest in listening to her pleas. She had made her choice. She had walked out, leaving everything behind for David. Now she would have to pay the price. Courtney's frustration grew with each passing day as her once comfortable life slipped further out of her control. One morning, she checked her bank account and found that it had been drained. The money she thought was hers, gone. Panic set in as she tried calling Nathan, but his phone went unanswered. She had no idea where to turn. She dialed David, hoping he could help her, but when he picked up, his voice sounded distant, distracted. "I've got my own problems right now, Courtney," he said. "I'm losing clients left and right. I can't deal with this right now." Courtney's heart sank. She had made her escape, she thought, but now everything was crumbling. She had no money, no security, and David, the man she had thought would be her savior, was falling apart. She hung up the phone, feeling utterly alone. Back in his office, Nathan leaned back in his chair, the satisfaction of a job well done settling into his bones. He could almost feel Courtney's desperation through the phone call. She hadn't expected this. She hadn't expected him to fight back so fiercely. But that was the thing about Nathan. He wasn't the type to let betrayal slide. No, he would make sure they paid for what they had done. Days turned into weeks, and David's business continued to flounder. The rumors about his finances were growing, and soon enough, his clients started to pull away. David's reputation was in free fall, and he didn't even know why. He couldn't figure out how everything had gone so wrong. All the while, Nathan watched from a distance, savoring the sweet feeling of vindication. Courtney's life had deteriorated as well. With no money, no job, and no one to turn to, she found herself spiraling into a desperate situation. Her friends, once so close, had started to distance themselves. Her reputation was tarnished, and her former life, once full of luxury and comfort, seemed like a distant memory. She had no idea what had happened. She had thought she could leave Nathan, find something better with David, but now she was paying the price for her choices. One evening, as Courtney sat in her small, rundown apartment, a thought began to gnaw at her. What if Nathan was behind all of this? What if he had orchestrated the entire thing? She couldn't prove it, of course, but the thought lingered in her mind. The financial ruin, the whispers, the downfall of David's business. It all seemed to line up. She tried to push the thought away, but it kept coming back. Meanwhile, Nathan was deep into the final stages of his plan. David had been arrested on charges of embezzlement and tax fraud, the evidence against him overwhelming. It was all part of Nathan's plan. He had worked carefully, ensuring that David's downfall would be complete, irreversible. And now, as he sat in his new home, he couldn't help but smile. The anger, the betrayal, it was all gone. It had been replaced by something much sweeter. Peace. Nathan had won. He had taken back everything they had tried to steal from him, and he had done it with precision and care. He had been the one to decide their fate, and now, as he looked out at the quiet world outside, he knew that nothing would ever be the same again. David was in prison. Courtney was alone, and Nathan had rebuilt his life, piece by piece, from the wreckage they had left behind. Now, with everything in its place, Nathan could finally move on.